on mental health awareness and care. I am Tom Easterday. I have the privilege of being the president of ILADD. And for those of you that don't know, ILADD stands for Independent Living for Adults with Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities. And I did have a PowerPoint. We're having some technical problems. We appreciate you joining us online. Apologize for the delay. Since I don't have the PowerPoint, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what ILADD does. Right now, we have a three-pronged mission. I should start with that. And our mission is, number one, to provide programming, and that would be enrichment and educational programming for individuals, adults, age 18 and over, with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So the second prong of our mission, in addition to our programming, and I'll talk a little bit more about the programming in just a moment, is to provide social options. And we provide a lot of social options. I'll mention those a little bit more detail in just a second too. But the third prong of our mission at ILADD is to provide housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we're probably about 3 to 5 years away from getting all of that done. We've got to go through the capital campaign and other things, but we do have some conceptual renderings on our website, both on the iladdinc.org website and also on the crossbridgepoint.org website. And we're working on a lot of different things with respect to acquiring the land right now and moving forward with that housing project. So got some plans in place. We're looking forward to that. Getting back to the programming just for a moment, we have a lot of programming going on right now. In addition to this informational seminar tonight, in 2 weeks we'll have the Family Connect, which goes kind of a deeper dive on our topic tonight. And we'll have some presenters here to be able to answer questions for you. We'll also be able to do through the online. And in addition to those informational type programs, we have several programs for adults with developmental intellectual disabilities. For example, we have the hiking club, and actually on April 24th, we're going to be hiking along the Central Canal Towpath in the city of Indianapolis. We go, generally it's on the third Sunday of each month at 1 o'clock. This month, because Easter falls on the third Sunday, we're going to be doing it on the fourth Sunday. So it's April 24th at 1 o'clock. And we'll be meeting at Newfields, otherwise known as the Indianapolis Museum of Art, to start at 1 o'clock. You can register again online for that. We have game nights. Game nights are on the second and fourth Thursday of each month, and they are a lot of fun. And thank you, Julie's here. Julie is our lead volunteer for the game nights, does a tremendous job with our game nights. A lot of fun. We have as many as 3 or 4 tables of individuals with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, playing a variety of games from Uno to bingo to Jenga to you name it, a lot of different games. It's a lot of fun at game nights. Game night is held at Amori Pizzeria and Restaurante in Zionsville in Boone Village, and that is on 6:30, again on the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. In addition to those programs, we also have a book club. Book club meets at 6:30 every Wednesday, and that's held down at Panera at Traders Point Shopping Center in Indianapolis. That's a lot of fun too. We're actually going to be starting a new book in a couple weeks. The new book is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. We just finished last night reading A Wrinkle in Time, so I'll be moving on to a new book. We have a lot of other programs, particularly a lot of classes that we have to teach independent living skills and to help enhance some of those skills that were learned through transition programs in high school and, of course, through their families also. Among those, relationships class just ended. We currently have a cooking class going on. We're going to have a safety class. There's several other classes are being planned. We have a great program committee that does a wonderful job putting together all of our programs and classes. Social options I mentioned earlier. I'll just very quickly tell you we've had a couple that are really great ones so far, and many more are planned in the near future. We had at Christmas time, we had a wonderful program where 20 individuals went down to Beef and Boards for their Christmas show. We just, about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was, when it was show, we had the what we call the Monday Mingle at the LA Cafe in Whitestown. A lot of fun. We had over 20. It's supposed to be limited to 20, but we had a couple show up. We hadn't registered, so we made room for them too. So had a lot of fun getting together and really just socializing for the evening at the LA Cafe. Coming up, this is going to be announced fairly soon, I believe. We're going to have a special event at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and we'll have a private tour and be able to enjoy, I believe they're going to get a lap around the track in the bus and everything. So that's going to be a lot of fun. That's coming up, and there'll be an announcement about that coming up soon. So that's just a little bit about what ILADD does. Again, programming, enrichment and educational programming, social options, and in the future, that housing development across Bridge Point. So thank you all for being here. I know it's spring break for a lot of people, so that's one thing we got to keep in mind next year, maybe not have this over spring break. But I hope all of you enjoy the presentation this evening. I know it's going to be a very valuable presentation. It is being recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel coming up for future use also. So with that, let me introduce our program manager. And if I could also have the members of the program committee, if you could stand up too, along with Michelle here. I want to give you a round of applause. You guys do a fantastic job. Thank you all very much. And this is our program manager, Michelle Gray. Michelle?
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm just going to start by saying, breathe in and breathe out. As much for myself as it is for everybody else here. Ironically, today we've had every challenge possible in getting this set up, so thankfully we are headed in the right direction at this point, so I appreciate your patience in us getting started a little bit late. Thanks for everybody that's joining us online. Hope some of you in warmer places on spring break. But we are here to talk tonight about mental health awareness and care. Tonight we have a guest speaker who's perfect for this event because she is not only a sibling to an individual with IDD, who I hope that she will share a little bit about, but she has also dedicated her entire professional career to the population of people in this room, not only to serving self-advocates, but also to caring for the caregivers. So we're going to hear from Dr. Terry Krakovich, and then immediately following her presentation, we're going to have time for questions and answers. So again, thank you for hanging in there with us as we get this late start. And thanks, Dr. K, for your patience. As a reminder for anybody that's watching on our Facebook Live event, you can pose questions to Dr. K in the chat. And we are going to be monitoring that throughout her presentation, and we will be able to share those with her and the audience during the Q&A time. So you should have in front of you an agenda for this evening with room to take some notes. And you should have also, for those of you here in the room, received a handout from Dr. K. So without any further delay, I want to introduce Dr. Terry Krakovich, known to many as Dr. K. Dr. K is a licensed clinical psychologist, a brain health coach, an entrepreneur whose mission is to improve quality of life for families. She has an online platform called Achieve Quality of Life, where Dr. K works with caregivers and those with chronic disabilities who want access to the best services and supports so that they feel less overwhelmed, more confident, and they can achieve peace of mind. So with that, we'll welcome Dr. K to the lectern.
I don't think it's going to come up, but I do have it going to the live stream. So if you flip through it, we'll at least have it for the recording.
Okay. Should we make that announcement?
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. And hello to everyone who's on the live stream virtually. Okay, so you guys can't necessarily see the slides that I'll be talking about up here, but many of you have handouts, I believe. Are there images of the slides on the handouts as well? Or okay. All right, so I will do my best to describe to you what I am seeing here.
We're going to share it via email.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this presentation is called Mental Health Awareness and Quality of Life, Opportunities for Growth. And so what we'll be talking about tonight is first going through some background, some terminology of intellectual disability, developmental disability, and mental health, just kind of describing what we're going to be talking about. And then specifically depression and anxiety, so two major types of mental health concerns that affect lots of people. And we're going to be talking about ways to recognize those signs and symptoms. So what does it look like if someone is experiencing depression or anxiety? And then we'll get into some caregiver topics, so caregivers in mental health, the topic of burnout, what that looks like, and then third, we will go into ways to improve mental health. So importantly, what can you do about all of this, and how do you help yourself to feel better? So we'll be talking about the mind-body connection a bit, and a quality of life framework that I've developed, and then how to pull things all together and take some steps moving forward. Okay, so intellectual disability is a diagnosis that occurs during childhood prior to the age of 18. And for someone to receive that diagnosis, both intellectual functioning and adaptive functioning are impacted. So that means that through an IQ test, someone is rated as having an intellectual disability either at the mild, moderate, severe, or profound level. And then their adaptive functioning is also impaired. So they might have some conceptual, social, or practical difficulties as well. And then the diagnosis of developmental disability is either a mental or a physical impairment, or it can be a combination of the two. So when you're seeing both of those occurring together, and they occur before the age of 22, so a slightly different age cutoff there. And then there are typically limitations across 3 or more areas of the following. So self-care might be impacted, language can be impacted, learning, self-direction, independent living, things of that nature. And so about 1 in 6 individuals, or 17% of children ages 3 to 17, are said to have a developmental disability in the United States. And so examples of such developmental disabilities are ADHD, cerebral palsy, hearing loss, vision impairment, autism, things like that, all falling into that category of developmental disability. And then there are also some health conditions that may co-occur with developmental disabilities, such as asthma, allergies, migraines, GI symptoms, things like that that are commonly seen. And then the last term that we're just going to define here before we get into some other things are mental health conditions. So what are those? And a mental health condition can be defined as a disturbance in behavior, mood, thought, or an interpersonal relationship. And there are a number of different mental health conditions that are listed in what's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM. Some of you may have heard that referenced. And that the most recent version of the DSM was published in 2013. And there was actually just a recent revision that came out in March of 2022. So just last month, and that's known as DSM-5-TR, in case you ever hear that being referenced. Okay, so on my next slide here, I have 4 different blurbs that we're going to be talking about having to do with intellectual and developmental disability and mental health. So the dual diagnosis of having both of those things combined. And so what do we know about those who have the dual diagnosis? We know that it can be hard to diagnose mental health conditions in individuals with IDDD because many have a hard time actually verbalizing what they're experiencing. So some of them have a hard time recognizing their emotions or their feelings and then being able to express it to someone else. There's also a lack of training across professionals because some might specialize in IDDD while others might specialize in mental health. And so really finding those who are a fit across both of those areas of expertise in order to merge them together. And then as family members and clinicians, we can also be biased by our expectations. So sometimes we might have an idea about what someone's going through because we live with them every day or we work with them all the time, and we can think that they're being manipulative or that they are being lazy, or we might label certain behaviors not recognizing that maybe this is due to depression, or maybe this is because of an underlying trauma history from 20 years ago, and now an individual might have a hard time regulating their emotions, and they might have some explosive aggression, and it could be mislabeled as intermittent explosive disorder when it's really due to their trauma history. And so there's a lot of different factors to consider as we bring mental health issues into this population. So in terms of depression and anxiety within the IDDD population, what we do know from research is that levels of depression and anxiety tend to increase when the level of the ID or DD increases. Researchers have found that when individuals live at home with their parents, they have increased depression or anxiety. And if they have a more difficult time making decisions for themselves, that could lead to higher levels of depression or anxiety, as well as having a fear of new situations. So when they're in adulthood and they're having to make more decisions for themselves, that can be extremely stressful. So during that transition time of moving out of high school and into adulthood, that can really lead to a lot of stress and anxiety and some more difficult symptoms for individuals. Okay, and the next topic we'll touch on is trauma. So recognizing that individuals with IDDD are vulnerable to stressful situations, and that it can be difficult at times to know how to cope or what to do when experiencing stress. And so that puts this population at a greater risk for experiencing trauma, which includes abuse and neglect as well. So in terms of abuse and neglect, those with developmental disabilities, according to the research, suffer 2.5 to 10 times the abuse and neglect of their non-disabled peers. So that is quite a high number there. And one 1995 study, which was a while back already, but greater than 90% of adults reported sexual abuse within their lifetime in the DD population, and 49% of their sample reported 10 or more abusive incidents. Okay, so getting into the topic of depression specifically, and how to recognize it in our loved ones. So what does it look like, and how do we know if we're actually seeing this? So on the slide here, I have a questionnaire called the PHQ-9. It's a brief survey that consists of 9 questions that either a clinician or a family member might consider asking to their loved ones to find out some more information about how they're feeling and what they're going through. And so the questions have to do with topics such as having little interest or pleasure in doing things, having difficulty falling or staying asleep, having changes in appetite, changes in concentration, and thoughts of being better off dead or wanting to hurt oneself. So things like that. And the individual would rate themselves on those topics on a scale from 0 to 3, with 0 meaning not at all, and 3 meaning that they're thinking these things on a pretty much everyday basis. And so once their scores are tallied up, an individual might fall into the mild, moderate, or severe range of depression. And so a measure such as this one is very helpful for clinicians to put together with additional background history in order to make a diagnosis. And so there's also a similar measure called the GAD-7, GAD-7, Generalized Anxiety Disorder. And this is for anxiety, and this consists of 7 questions. And so similarly to what we were just talking about for depression, there's a scale that measures anxiety, looking at whether an individual might be nervous, anxious, or on edge, or if they have trouble relaxing, or if they're becoming more annoyed or irritable. And so those kinds of symptoms would lead someone to think, okay, there might be something going on with anxiety here. Let's explore this further and see if we should seek some treatment and reach out for help. Okay. So on this slide here, moving into the caregiver section of our talk. So what can caregivers do and how can they help if they're recognizing that their loved ones are experiencing depression or anxiety? So there are a number of things that caregivers can do. The first one would be to encourage treatment. So mentioning to your loved one that they might want to talk to a therapist or find someone, whether it's a psychologist, a social worker, a licensed mental health counselor, a psychiatrist, someone who they can speak to in a confidential manner in order to really explain what they're going through. Someone outside the family, kind of a neutral third party who might not know the ins and outs of their life, but can really give them some perspective and evidence-based recommendations of how to help them feel better. So encouraging treatment is a big thing that caregivers can do. Compassionate listening is another piece to this. So not just attempting to jump right in and solve a problem, but really being empathetic and listening to what the loved one is sharing with you. So sitting and refraining from speaking back right away, but just sitting and kind of taking it all in compassionately. And then the third piece that caregivers can do is to assist with daily tasks. So if someone is experiencing depression, they might have decreased motivation, or they might have a harder time getting up and going and getting their daily routine completed, getting their chores done, their homework, their job responsibilities, whatever it may be. And so as caregivers, being able to step in and assist with some of those things, recognizing that it can be difficult, is something that can be really valuable and make a huge difference. Fourth, to be able to respond to a crisis situation and to recognize when there is a crisis or if there's potentially an emergency on the brink. So if an individual is expressing that they might have thoughts of hurting themselves, or if they're feeling as though they're a burden to their family members, or if they've expressed a lot of guilt, thinking that they're not needed in their life, or that the world would be better off without them, things like that. Being able to respond to that situation by reaching out for help, either to a crisis line or to contact a therapist directly and explain exactly what's going on. That would be a wonderful thing to be doing. So recognizing those signs, keeping an eye out, and being able to reach out for help when needed. And then fifth, for caregivers, taking care of yourself. So that is a huge one, that in order to be present and be the best versions of ourselves for our loved ones, we really do have to take care of ourselves as caregivers. And so that takes us into our next piece here. I wish I could show you this slide because there's a picture of a cat and there's a little caption on the top, and he says, "I'm so calm, happy, and well rested." Said no caregiver ever. And so the idea is that we all wish we can feel calm and happy and rested all the time, but caregiving is one of those things that is just going to pull at us with so many different emotions in one day. And not being able to get enough sleep is just going to be part of life sometimes, and there's many things that caregivers have to deal with. And so caregivers do have mental health concerns as well. And so depression and anxiety certainly impact caregivers as much as they do the individuals that they're supporting. And so there was a meta-analysis conducted in 2019, which is a review across a number of studies. And so they included 19 different studies in this review. And what they found in surveying parents of children with cerebral palsy and autism was that nearly all parents endorsed symptoms of depression and anxiety. And some factors that were associated with higher levels of depression included the severity level of their child's disability, and then also having a lower household income was strongly correlated with greater mental health concerns. And there are tons of other studies out there, so really I'm just citing one of probably thousands. But if you guys are at all interested in learning more about just different findings that have been reported from caregivers of all different demographic and socioeconomic backgrounds, caregivers, siblings, parents, support staff. There's a lot of information out there to help guide you, and I'd be happy to share some more resources as well. Okay, so getting into ways to improve mental health. So once we're recognizing some of the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, so someone's feeling down for most of the time, they are potentially very restless and agitated or pacing back and forth, they're constantly on the go, there are things that we can do. And so mental health therapy is one of those things that can address the way that someone is thinking. So there are forms of therapy that are rooted in cognitive thought. So cognitive behavior therapy is one type that kind of combines the focusing on the thought process along with behavioral activation. There's something called exposure therapy, where for individuals who may have certain anxieties or phobias, we might target specific activities in their life and over time expose them to the thing that's actually making them anxious. And with more and more exposure and working through the process, they become less and less anxious in such situations. So for example, an individual who is 17 and is afraid to drive a car, we might gradually over time introduce them to aspects of that process and then eventually have them driving, even though initially they might have just expressed complete disdain and disapproval for starting that whole process. So there are ways to work through these issues with a therapist. And so outside of the therapy setting, which typically does involve talking and verbally communicating in some capacity, there are other ways to improve mental health concerns, such as nutraceutical supplements. So kind of an alternative to pharmacological drugs would be this approach that has more of a basis in brain health. So taking certain vitamins and supplements that have research behind them to be shown to affect mental health. So things such as omega-3 fatty acids, taking that on a daily basis has been shown to improve mood. Vitamin D is another nutraceutical. Probiotics is a big one because there's a connection between our gut and our brain. And so taking a daily probiotic has been shown to reduce symptoms of anxiety. And GABA is a neurotransmitter that can be taken in the form of a supplement or combined with some other different herbs, and that has strongly been shown to reduce symptoms of anxiety. So there's a lot of different things out there to explore. And so outside of some of the supplement world, there are things that one can do on a daily basis as part of their routine in terms of detoxing the body. So has anyone ever used a sauna before? Gone in a sauna? Those can be really helpful in detoxifying through sweat. So whether it's chemicals that we might have had seep into our bodies from some shampoos that we're using, or exposure to pollutants in the air, or from chemicals in the foods that we're eating, food dyes, things like that. So finding ways to detox ourselves through exercise and sweating is a big one. And so exercise has really been linked to much improvement in mental health outcomes. And so that's a big thing that I always mention to my clients, especially in that first meeting when I'm getting to know them. I ask them if exercise is a part of their life, and certainly be something I'd recommend. Meditation is another thing that has been shown to be extremely helpful in creating that peace of mind that we're all looking for. And sometimes there can be some hesitation about that. And let me ask you guys in the audience, has anyone ever meditated before? And what do you think of when you hear that someone's telling you to meditate? What's the first thought that pops into your mind? Peace? Okay, good. Yep. Anything else? Any hesitations to it?
I have a hard time.
Okay.
Staying focused.
That tends to be a common expressed thought, that it can be hard. I don't know how to sit still. I've tried and I can't do it. It's just not for me. Calming? Yep. Yeah. And so there really are a lot of benefits, and I'm just going to read off a couple of them right now just to bring to your attention. And some of these things are real physical health benefits that you wouldn't necessarily suspect meditation can help with, but it does. So increased attention. So if you know someone who has ADHD or decreased ability to focus, maybe they've had a brain injury or they just have a difficult time paying attention, meditation can help with that. So sitting still. Enhancing willpower, so the ability to wait and be less impulsive. It can improve sleep. It can help chronic pain feel less painful. It can lower blood pressure, reduce symptoms of anxiety and depression, and just promote a greater sense of compassion and understanding of the world around us. So there really is no downside to doing it, and who knows what kind of effects it may have for you. And so that's something that I would certainly recommend people look into. And there are a number of different ways to get into meditation, whether it's by downloading an app or just taking time to sit in silence with your eyes closed, listen to what sounds are around you, whether it's an air conditioner or some cars going by outside. And you just focus on the noise and try to quiet the thoughts that are going on in your mind. And if it helps, sometimes setting a timer is a good thing, and just try to will yourself to make it the entire 5 minutes or whatever you put on your timer, and anything is better than nothing. So certainly recommend that. Okay, now getting into the mind-body connection a little bit more. So ways to improve mental health by thinking about the relationship between the mind and the body. So what we think about affects our body. You guys think that's a true statement? Yeah? Has anyone ever experienced that in their own life? If you're anxious, have you ever noticed that you have a stomach ache, or maybe you're running to the bathroom every 2 seconds, that there's some connection there? You're thinking something negative or having nervous thoughts, and then all of a sudden your body is enjoying it as well. Sometimes if we're eating certain foods that are high in artificial ingredients or chemicals, we might notice that we feel more hyperactive, or our hearts can start racing. And so certain chemicals in our body can affect us, and then in turn we can feel more anxious and a little off. So it can go both ways. Oh, okay, the slides are back. All right. Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, we're going to keep powering through here. Okay. And so on a similar vein, it's possible for the foods that we eat to improve our mood. So food can have a negative impact on us if we're not eating the right things. But then if we are eating what are considered to be brain healthy foods, that can really boost our mood, our energy, our well-being. It can decrease our symptoms of depression and help us to feel less anxious. So in terms of some examples of those foods, ones that have probiotics in them can really lead to positive effects on our mental health. So having things such as kefir, yogurt, sauerkraut that have probiotics in them would be a way to consume the same probiotics that are in supplements in food form, as an example. Using herbs such as turmeric, spices while we're eating can help to reduce inflammation and lead us to have reduced symptoms of depression. There's a lot of really great books and resources out there these days that are specifically addressing this topic. So what foods can we eat to target symptoms of ADHD, or what can we do to decrease anxiety? And so I'd be happy to share some resources. There's one book called This Is Your Brain on Food by Dr. Uma Naidu. She's a a Harvard psychiatrist, and she specializes in this field. It's called nutritional psychiatry. And her book is wonderful. It really goes chapter by chapter into different mental health concerns, and she talks about different foods that you can be eating that can really help your body to work through these conditions.
What is her name again?
Sure. Dr. Uma, U-M-A, and then her last name is Naidu. N is in Nancy, A-I-D is in dog, O-O. Yep, great question. Oh, okay, we got the slides. I'm not going to get too excited. Okay, so moving into ways to help caregivers. How can we improve their quality of life? And so this is an area that I'm particularly passionate about, as Michelle referenced. And so I've developed a quality of life framework that I'll be applying to the online platform that I'm building called Achieve Quality of Life. And our goal is to be able to assist caregivers across 6 different areas, one being the emotional supports and processing, so helping caregivers process whatever emotions they're going through at any stage of life. So if they have a child who is newly diagnosed with autism, for example, helping them to process that diagnosis, or they have a child who is exiting the school system, or they're thinking about retirement and planning for the next stages of their life. What is all of that from emotional and a psychological standpoint looking like? And so helping caregivers to work through some of those issues in an individual or a group setting. Another area that we're aiming to address is called skill building, where we help the caregivers to acquire the knowledge, tools, and information that they're needing at any stage across the lifespan. So whether their child is looking for some social skills, or whether they're wanting to help their child keep a job, or if they are having a hard time getting their child to sleep through the night, or their child is only wanting to eat 5 foods. So whatever kind of topic, whether it's pertaining to sensory integration, feeding, sleep therapy, helping caregivers acquire the skills that they need to better improve things for their family. And the third pillar is future planning. So on those topics, thinking ahead, whether it be guardianship or some legal issues, or thinking about financially how they're going to best provide for their loved ones down the road, ways to plan for the future. The fourth pillar is called environmental change. So helping families to better their environment, better their surroundings. So thinking about the home setting, the clinic or school setting, where are the individuals living, and can we help to make these settings more supportive and more accessible or just more comfortable. So if a caregiver is helping their adult child to move into a supported living environment or a group home setting with roommates, what can we do to ensure that everyone who's living in that setting is feeling at ease and has access to everything they need? And how can we arrange the environment to make sure that everyone is comfortable and successful? Then the fourth pillar, the fifth, is to assist with physical and other forms of health and well-being. So helping caregivers to recognize ways to improve themselves from a physical health perspective. And then the last pillar is connection. So having that component of community within the platform. So being able to connect and network with caregivers who are at similar life stages, having subgroups and special interest groups in order to promote that connection across caregivers. So those are the 6 pillars and ways that we plan to improve quality of life for caregivers. And so now moving on to the slide that says, ways to improve mental health, what can you do? So turning this over to you guys in order to take control of your own future and what this is going to look like for you. So the ways that everyone tackles mental health are going to differ from one individual to another. And so there are a lot of different things that we can incorporate into our lives and into our lifestyles, and it's going to vary from one person to the next. So in terms of things that we've just discussed, such as talk therapy or more of the holistic types of health treatments, socializing, medications, diet, getting out into nature, turning to spirituality and faith, things like that, thinking about how this is affecting you and what you're already doing, what you want to do more of, and then what this can look like moving forward. So my goal from today is really to talk about the importance of all of these different strategies. Right here, although you cannot see it for those of you in the room, there's a slide that talks about how your habits are going to determine the quality of your life. So thinking about those daily habits and the importance of being consistent in our daily routines. So it's the simple things that we do every day that are really going to add up and make the biggest difference for us. So whether that's trying to go for a walk every day or eat fruits and vegetables every day, it might not seem like such a huge drastic change. But if you're able to do that for weeks at a time or months at a time, it really can add up and make a big impact on our mental health. So even if you're just sitting and meditating for 3 minutes every day, things like that. So at this time, I would like to turn things over to you and think about what you will do next. And so as a quick interactive component here, even though you can't necessarily see the visual on the slide, there's a picture of a really long flight of stairs. And so I would ask all of you guys to stand up in your seats, please, just quickly. And what we're going to do is take 2 steps forward. And so the idea is that we're not just going to take 1 step, because when you take 1 step, one of your feet are still planted behind you and you're still stuck exactly where you were. So 1 step isn't really going to cut it, but you need to take 2 in order to move forward. So taking a step with your right foot, step with your left foot. Okay, so where is that getting you? Somewhere new, right? Okay, so what is that going to look like for you? Taking those 2 steps and making a change that's going to better your mental health. So on the handout that you guys have in front of you, and it should also be at the end of this presentation here, there are some prompts for you to start thinking about something that you might do. Oh, now it's okay. Something that you'll start doing, something that you'll stop doing in your life, and then something that you'll continue doing. And so I'd like you all to take a minute, if you could, and fill those sections out. Okay, how's everyone doing? Is it pretty smooth, or is there an area that anyone's struggling on? We got such talkers in the audience here. It seems like some of you are still busy, so I'll give you some time. Okay, do we have any brave volunteers who'd like to share something that they would like to start doing? Yes, in the back.
Yeah, getting more involved in community activities.
Oh, great. Okay. Any specifically that come to mind when you think about community activities?
Well, ILADD and church.
Uh-huh. Great. He said ILADD in church for those of you on the live stream who couldn't hear that. Okay, yep. That's a great thing to start doing. Anyone else like to share something that they're going to start doing? Mm-hmm.
Exercising.
Oh, okay. Good. So what does that mean? Because that's a pretty broad goal to have, right?
Yeah.
Can you break that down at all into maybe the type of exercise that you're interested in trying?
I don't know, walking and going to the gym so I can eat more cake.
Oh, okay. So he works at Cake Bake Shop?
That's on the one where it says stop bringing home cake.
Oh, stop bringing home cake.
I
Okay.
bring home cake at least twice a week.
Oh
It's
my
bad.
gosh.
It's bad.
Ooh. Okay. Great. Anyone else for something that they plan to stop doing moving forward? Any takers?
I put finding ways to escape my routines.
Oh.
Routines are what I need
Mm-hmm. Okay.
when I
Yeah. So you find yourself making excuses to not do the things you know you should do? Yep, that's a common one. Yep. There's always going to be something that comes up to throw us off track. So that's the key. Going back to that picture before about the consistency and just doing the best we can every day. Every day is a blank slate and an opportunity to start again to see if we can incorporate some of those habits in. Okay. So we are kind of nearing the end of the presentation for this evening, and so if it makes sense, we can open things up for questions and see if anyone has some specific thoughts on the topic of mental health, anything that they wanted to discuss this evening. I'd be happy to share more about myself as well and things that I'm involved with, if that's helpful. So I guess I can start doing that. And then if you guys have questions, just let me know. Feel free to put up your hand and I'll know that I can turn things over to you. Yes? Okay. All right. So first I will mention how, as Michelle referenced earlier, I'm a clinical psychologist. I do have a brother with the diagnoses of autism and ADHD, and he's 6 years younger than me. So we kind of had an interesting dynamic growing up where I had a lot of my childhood to myself before he was born. So I had my parents all to myself, and I grew up in New Jersey, and so that's where my brother currently resides with my parents. And I moved out to Indiana about a decade ago. I moved out here to attend graduate school, and I came here and now practice as a clinical psychologist. And I am currently directing a mental health clinic for a company called Autism Companion Services in Indianapolis. And so that's where I work and see clients. And so for anyone who is interested in mental health therapy for themselves or their loved ones, we see individuals with IDDD as well as caregivers, family members, and staff who are supporting them as well. And we take commercial insurance as well as Medicaid. So we're able to see folks who are on the waiver. And so that is something that I'm currently involved with, in addition to...
Do they need a diagnosis of autism?
Not necessarily, no. And so the way that works is someone can come in with some mental health concerns, and we would either give them a diagnosis upon their first appointment for billing purposes, or if they warranted a diagnosis, or at times we can do a full diagnostic evaluation if that's something that's needed. So that's also something that we do at the clinic. We do evaluations for autism spectrum disorder, for example. So if you know of anyone who is looking for evaluation services or therapy, that's something I can do as well. And then there's the Achieve Quality of Life online business. And so on your handout there is my contact information for Achieve Quality of Life. And that business is focused more on the caregivers, but really the unit as a family. Oh, they just came back on. Okay. And so to go over to that website would be a great place to go. Yes, Tom?
You talked earlier about anxiety, overcoming fears.
Mm-hmm.
And my son with Fragile X syndrome has a fear of storms.
Oh.
And so we can't exactly expose him to the fear to help him overcome that. We put him outside in the thunderstorm.
Uh-huh.
So it's very difficult to help him to overcome that. I just wondered if you had any tips with regard to that.
Okay, that's a great question. Yeah, so sometimes when it comes to phobias or fears that people might have, when we wouldn't necessarily want to expose them to something dangerous. So if someone has a fear of falling off of a cliff or off of a building, you wouldn't necessarily want them to go through that. So simulating the event to the best of your ability in different ways. So maybe having them listen to an audio track of a thunderstorm, or watch a video of the movie Twister, or something that is going to get their nervous system activated, regardless of whether they're physically there in the present moment or if they're experiencing it in a more simulated capacity. It can have a very similar effect. So that would probably be the direction I would go in. You're welcome. Yes, did you have a question back there?
Is that gonna have a good ending? How is that gonna make them feel better?
So at first it's not. It'll probably make them feel very uncomfortable and afraid and fearful. But the goal is actually to experience that discomfort, even though it might sound kind of contraindicated and paradoxical that we're wanting you to feel discomfort. But that really is the best way to work through anxiety. So for something like this, standing up and giving a presentation, really the cure to having a fear of public speaking is to get up and do it, and you work through it. Or if you are afraid of storms, then sitting through the movie Twister and allowing yourself to feel your heart racing fast or to feel yourself sweating and know that you're still safe and that it's going to be okay.
Have a good ending at the end? Not where everyone should make it, but it's a negative ending, and then that would make them feel worse about it, because the first reason why we're scared of them in the first place.
I just want to make sure I caught all of that. So you're saying that the ending might not be so positive?
If it's a negative ending, that would make them feel worse.
Okay.
Better.
Yeah, and so the goal is to do that in a supported setting also, with the help of a therapist and over time. So it's not like, unfortunately, you just watch the movie Twister once and your phobia is gone. There's more of a process to it.
It's a short little pieces of it, maybe to begin with.
Yeah, even some clips, exactly. Yeah, so it's a gradual process of exposure. Yeah. Yeah, good questions. Yes.
So I was just gonna mention, that's the old saying, like if you're on a horse and you fall off, get back on the horse.
Mm-hmm.
Because eventually you'll get over your fear.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's where all those old expressions come from. There's some wisdom to them. Yep. Uh-huh.
Is there a way to access these checklists of symptoms? I mean, it's so small, like,
Oh,
how can
yes.
I find that?
Questionnaires.
Definitely. If you would like to either reach out by email or to schedule a call through my website, we can certainly talk more about that, and I can look at the list of emails and maybe send things out. Depending on how many folks in the group are interested in that, we can email it to anyone who wants access.
Can that be completed by the person or a caregiver, or is that something that needs to be?
It can be by the caregiver as well. It's helpful for a clinician to kind of look things over also, but it can give a good perspective too. So I would say it's definitely valuable. Yep.
And the
Yeah.
Another question
Mhm.
is, just depending on the situation though, but sometimes, I don't know, like, how would you determine where to start? Like, if you should see a psychologist, just a therapist, psychiatrist, I mean, how do you know where to begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so it depends on what you're observing and what you think the concerns are. So I have a client who I work with, a family, and they mentioned to me how it's always helpful to come to the mental health therapy sessions in order to talk things through that they may eventually bring to their psychiatrist or their medication management appointments. But it helps to have a sounding board and more time available to speak with someone and get different perspectives and be able to talk through issues. And so it kind of depends on what you're looking for. So some folks might just want to take a pill and hope that that is going to help to solve their problems, while others might want to work on things thinking more of the long term of how it's going to help them. Research shows that targeting both the therapy and the medications combined is really most effective. So utilizing both the mental health counseling piece and the medication management can really be helpful together. So that's the approach that I would recommend. And as far as who to see first, either a psychologist or a psychiatrist can give a diagnosis of a mental health condition, but sometimes it could be helpful to have more time to process and talk through things to see whether medication is going to be necessary or helpful. And so sometimes it's not necessarily the first route or the first step to take. So that's kind of on a case-by-case basis, though, as well. Yep.
Can you give us a possible cost on, let's say, a person that didn't have insurance wanted to be evaluated? Could you give us that here at this meeting? Just a rough cost on that.
A cost for an evaluation? Okay. Well, maybe we can talk about that one after this group discussion and discuss on an individual basis. Yep, that's a good question, though. Mm-hmm.
So how do you, my son that is not able to communicate how medication makes him feel, how do you work through that with individuals with intellectual disabilities?
Ooh, good question. Okay, yeah. So how does he do with visuals and with communicating in other ways?
You might want to repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, thank you. So the question was, for a child who has difficulty communicating verbally or is nonverbal and is taking medications, what is the best way to determine if the medication is working well, if there are any side effects, or what kind of outcomes it's having? And so my first question was, how does this child do with visual aids and if there are other ways that he might be able to communicate aside from using words.
Visually, like, yeah, we use a lot of visual aids with him.
Okay.
But to develop, to come up with the language,
Mm-hmm.
to tell you this is making me feel bad.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have friends that take medication and they're like, oh, I don't like that one, it doesn't make me feel good.
Right.
He wouldn't know how to do that.
Yeah. So one place to start would be in terms of recognizing feelings and sensations in the body. So seeing whether the individual is able to label things as simple as this feels good or this feels bad, and finding a way to communicate that. So something very extreme, one way or the other. And then some more nuanced feelings, like this is making me feel mad when I take this, or this makes me feel sad, and having a way to explain that. So whether it's pointing to a picture of someone crying, or making the gestures themselves, oh, I'm sad, or demonstrating how they're feeling, pointing to a part on their body, their stomach if it's hurting, or their head if it's hurting, and being able to visually indicate what they're thinking or feeling. Do you think any of those ways might be feasible right now?
Possibly. And the thing is the buildup of
Yeah.
the patient, and then you don't know you kind of have to watch how he's acting, and you don't
Yep.
know what is the medication, what is just, the environmental things going on at the time. So it's just difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. There's a lot of factors involved, but definitely trying to take the baseline data prior to taking the medication and trying to keep everything else as consistent or the same as possible for those few weeks while starting a new medication to really get an idea and inform the entire treatment team or anyone who's interacting with your child to try to get a number of different observations and really just take all of those different perspectives into account. Yeah, that's certainly something, though, to talk to a mental health professional about as you're going through that process. And I know a lot of medication management providers appreciate the information and the updates along the way to know how their patients are doing and how they're responding. Yep, good question. Any other? Yes? Mm-hmm.
How do you get around working with someone who is stubborn to get them to do the positive things that, but no, I don't like that, but no, I don't want to.
That's me. I'm very, I don't mind. I am very stubborn when it comes to, was it trying new things?
Trying new things, getting up and
It's,
moving.
I think it's the fact that getting there, that it's telling me to actually go there. Once I'm there, I know, oh, I'll have fun. It's the fact of pushing you to get to where you need to be, to
Okay.
realize that it's actually fun.
Yeah,
And
that's
I'm
really
stubborn
great
most of the
insight.
time I was like, at first I was like, oh, with the ILADD stuff, I was like, with the event that we had, I was like, oh, I don't know if this will be fun. And I got there, I was like, this is fun. I doubt myself and I'm stubborn. I was like, I don't want to do this, but then it's fun once I get there.
And that,
You get to, that's the reason why I'm open to learning more now that I'm mature, because there's so many, there could be a whole lot of, like a whole lot of things you could learn, a whole lot of things you could apply. That's in that life, that this world.
That's awesome. We got a wise woman over here.
Yeah? Can you repeat what she said? And then I'll repeat it again to our live stream audience.
Oh, that it's fun to try new things, and like there's a lot of, like there's a lot of things that the world has to offer. Like you can learn new things, you can learn new opportunities.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
So you enjoy finding those new opportunities?
yeah.
and it is just pushing yourself to do them, right?
Yeah, so trying to learn from the past, from our previous experiences, and reminding ourselves, oh, that was actually fun before. Maybe I should try that again.
What about for foods that would be good for someone, or exercise,
Mm.
where it's not always like, oh, that was fun. There's not that fun aspect. The social stuff, yes,
Yeah.
there's usually a
Right.
fun aspect to it. But to exercise and food, there's not really a fun
I love food.
outcome.
I hear you. Yes, that's a difficult question. And so the key is to get some buy-in wherever you can. So even if it's very small, and just to find ways to work yourself in to these new activities and to try to tack it on to things that he does enjoy. So it sounds like right now you're currently employed?
I work at the Cake Bake Shop in Broadwickel. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah.
And they're opening up a third location in Walt Disney World.
That's
Boardwalk
incredible.
In 2023.
Ooh. Yeah, so I'm sure that at one time when you hadn't worked there before, it was all very new
Definitely.
and scary. And can you remember back to that time in your life and what that was like, actually going there on the first day?
It's like, am I gonna mess things up? Who's gonna be there? Are they gonna be friendly? Are they gonna be nice?
Wow.
Is it gonna be stressful and chaotic and
Mhm.
busy? What's it gonna be like?
Yeah, you probably had all kinds of thoughts and worries and concerns. And I think most people do when they're doing something new, when they're going to a new place and trying a new activity. And so sometimes it's helpful to remember the reason that you're doing it. So when you started your job, did you have a motivation or a reason why you were wanting to work?
Money.
Okay, yep, that is a very good motivator and a why.
Why to go buy stuff?
Yes. Yeah. So when it comes to exercise, is there any reason that someone would do such a thing? Is there any motivator?
So then you can eat the eat the foods you want if you exercise and do all the exercising with it, and then you can eat what you want.
Yep. That's one reason people exercise. Yep. Are there any other reasons?
Makes you feel better.
Uh-huh. Improves mood. Yep.
It definitely.
Can it prolong your life potentially? I think that's a pretty good reason. And wanting to stay healthy, reduce disease, so that we can enjoy the things that we love and be there for our loved ones and families and make the most of our time here on Earth, you know? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it said later on that stubborn curiosity. You were talking about anxiety or being anxious. Would that be a sign of anxiety, not wanting to participate in activity?
It could be, yes. Yep. So not wanting to participate in activities, could that be a sign of anxiety? I believe that was the question. Yep. It could be a sign of social anxiety if some of the reason behind that is a fear of being judged or a fear of something not going well and creating some discomfort. It could potentially be a sign of depression if you're not wanting to get out and do things that you used to enjoy, if you're feeling down. Yeah, it can mean a number of things. And it might just be something that is happening as a standalone that isn't necessarily part of a diagnosable condition per se either. Yep.
So breaking the pattern of negative thinking, especially after COVID. My son got into a lot of negative thinking because of a lot of experiences that happened in his life. And with more time
Yep.
locked away in the house,
Wow.
just, that deep groove in the brain.
Mhm.
To break out of that groove.
Yeah, so how to break some of those patterns of negative thinking, especially after being more housebound during COVID and coming into current day. There are some ways to do that, and it has to do with creating new pathways in the brain and coming up with new positive ways of thinking and kind of reframing and restructuring that thought process, which has become so familiar and so comfortable. So it's kind of like you've dug a little moat in the sand and you've gotten so good at creating this hole, and the water flows through it so easily because it's dug so well. And the idea is to carve out a new path and create a new way for the water to flow that's healthier, instead of taking the same path that wasn't helpful. And so, yeah, things like that can be worked on in therapy by talking through some of the difficulties and helping to get rid of some of those thought patterns. Yep. Great questions. Okay, so I'm noticing that it's close to 8 p.m. You think we should break apart and do more of an individual focused line of questions and go from there? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. K. I just want to, again, thank you everybody for your patience. For those of you that, like me, are visual learners, she had an excellent PowerPoint presentation, and she had lots of websites and references that we are going to get out to you. And because that's how I learn. I'm going to share that with you, especially to those in this room tonight. I'm going to send that out via email tonight while it's fresh in your brain, so that you can follow up on those kind of things and do a little bit more digging. The other good news is that when we have our other event later this month on the 21st, and we continue to talk about mental health, we're going to have it set up. We are going to have a guest speaker, and then we're going to have lots of vendors here and providers who actually are providing therapeutic and different kinds of services, so that you can talk and interact with them. And Dr. K has agreed to come back and have a table where she is talking and interacting with people about the mental health counseling that she does and the work with the caregivers. So thankfully, you will have more in-depth opportunities for that then too. And I just want to say, for the program committee, ironically, we had decided for the first time tonight that we were not going to provide copies of the PowerPoint presentations. We were just going to email them. I think we learned our lesson. But it's always good to have a backup. But I want to say thank you to Dr. K. She has young children at home, and she's giving up her evening to come spend it with us and share her knowledge. And I want to say thanks to the program committee, especially to Lisa Batts, who helped organize and promote this, and to Jill and Barb, who are our diehards tonight with me. So I want to just encourage you. There is a yellow flyer. I think they're up on the table. Please grab one. It has all of our upcoming events, and Tom had alluded to the social outing that's coming up in April at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and you guys are getting the first sneak peek. I have not even sent out an email yet to advertise that, but it is on there. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to pick that up and register for that event. Dr. K has also an interest form. Is that a Jill has it. Dr. K is collecting any names and email addresses for anybody that would like to join her mailing list and have some more information sent to you specifically from her. So please see Jill, and we'll get that get you added to that list. If there's nothing else, we have, like I said, another event following up on the 21st. We're inviting back Gwen Chesterfield and Maggie Brown from the IUPUI site program, and they're going to talk more about whole wellness, what that means, incorporating not only the physical, the occupational, all the aspects of healthy and wellness that we have been talking about. And I appreciate your doing such a thorough job and talking about all those things. So when she talks about supplements and, those mind-body connections, lots of the information that you will be able to follow up on will be in her handout. So if we don't have anything else, I will just conclude our meeting for tonight and appreciate all of you coming, and thanks to everybody who is watching online. Thank you.